What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Hands-On channel. I'm glad you stopped by. So I opened up a can of worms about 5 days ago with a video that I titled Tractor Supply Chicken Feed Reportedly Causing Egg Laying to Stop. In my thumbnail, I had the chicken feed conspiracy up there. And people are reporting little or no egg production in their backyard flocks. And yes, it's wintertime, and chickens naturally produce a lot less eggs in the wintertime. You know, usually they go into a molten stage in late fall, early winter, and then their egg production will drop off. There's ways around that. You can put lights in there. We normally just use like a 40 or 60 watt bulb. Of course, that's a whole nother rant that I can go on. I can't even get normal incandescent bulbs anymore. The whole point is to be able to put like a 60 or 75 watt bulb in with my chickens so that I could keep them from freezing to death and not have to buy a heat lamp, which uses a lot more power. And not only that, they're a fire risk. So anyway, mini rant concluded. I can't get incandescent bulbs anymore, and it pisses me off, and it's because of government meddling. But anyway, on to the next one. It's unnatural for chickens to produce 0 eggs, even in the winter. That's not normal. So egg production should normally drop off. You know, I mean, I've got 6 hens, and normally my egg production will drop off to like around 2 to 3, 4, something like that on a daily. You know, if I had to average, I'd say about 3 or 4 eggs a day is what I'm getting out of my 6 hens, even in the winter time. In the summer months, it's not uncommon for me to get 5 to 6 eggs every day. So yes, egg production does drop off in the wintertime. I think most of us that raise backyard flocks or have a little bit of experience in dealing with chickens and raising chickens know this. And we usually put lights and things like this in. Well, my chickens dropped off earlier this year. Now, I don't use Producer's Pride, which is the Tractor Supply chicken feed that's in question. I don't use that brand. I use Nutritional. 16% layer pellets is what we've been using for years, and we've never had a problem with that. Now, it doesn't mean that there couldn't be a problem with that. Like earlier, I guess it was in the fall, I picked up several bags of the Nutritional, and I opened one of the bags up, and it was a lot greener than the previous bags that I'd been giving them. So that there could have been a correlation there. Maybe something changed in the main batch of the whatever the source material they were putting in there that was a lot more green. Maybe it was mold or mildew. I don't know. I couldn't determine what that was, but that was around the time my chickens started producing less eggs on a daily basis. So that's when we moved our light in. I went and bought some new batches of the same feed. It wasn't the weird color anymore, so we slowly went through that weird green stuff. I blended it in with the other stuff, and their egg production went back up. So maybe that was a coincidence. Maybe it was, you know, because the cold weather was coming on. But we discussed last time in the last video series, it wasn't just about the chicken feed. It was also about the legitimacy of the avian flu that's been going around right now, and how the CDC has killed over 60 million chickens in the last year or so. And that's kind of a big deal. And what I mean by the legitimacy of it, if you didn't see that video, is it real? I mean, I'm not arguing that the avian flu, whether it exists or not, obviously it exists. We've seen it for years and years, but something is different this year that's causing the CDC and other, like FDA and other groups to go around and kill millions and millions of chickens, causing a potential food shortage, or if nothing else, price increases in the future. Because, you know, as we all know, it's all about supply and demand. But I got a lot of great comments from that last video that I did on these topics, and I wanted to continue that discussion because I was just really blown away how smart you guys were and how many great tips we got in there. And I want to share some of these with you guys in case you're having reduced production. Some of these tips may help you out. So I thought I'd share some of the best comments from both sides of the debate, because there were some people that said that they've been using the Producer's Pride and haven't noticed any egg reduction or anything like that. And I kind of wonder if it isn't like a batch situation where maybe they made a bad batch at the plant and it went out to a wide group of people and people stocked up on that particular batch, or maybe it was a certain plant changed their recipe or something like that. But in that article we went over from Gateway Pundit, Tractor Supply admits they changed the formula. So that seems to be the correlation there. So I wanted to say this too. Producer's Pride is not necessarily exclusively a Tractor Supply product or brand. It's made by Purina. Apparently all this stuff, a lot of the chicken feed is made by Purina. So What I found through reading through the comments were several people were reporting little or no egg production, and they weren't using Producer's Pride. They were using other brands. Some of them were using Dumore or Dumar, however you say that. Some of them were using the Atwood's brand feed that they went and bought at Atwood's. Some of them were using Walmart branded feed and having the same sort of problem. So it's not necessarily just Tractor Supply. It's, in my opinion, based on the comments, seems to be a Purina related deal here. So pay attention to that, where your food comes from. If you can buy it locally or make it yourself, like a lot of people suggested in the comments, I suggest you do that. But I want you to keep in mind that this is anecdotal evidence. I'm not a scientist. I never claimed to be. I'm just a concerned homesteader. And I'm trying to, and a concerned American citizen. I'm trying to fight back against the New World Order. It's not a secret that that's what part of my channel is all about, is resisting tyranny and resisting the New World Order and the threats that they pose on freedom-loving Americans. So let's get into the first comment here. We saw a dramatic drop in eggs when our hens started molting in the fall. They had been on Producer's Pride, but we changed them to a local feed and added a light, and it has made a world of difference. We are getting back to our normal summertime levels of egg production. So they found a workaround. They were having a problem, a dramatic drop in eggs with Producer's Pride. They switched to a different brand, added a light. Egg production seems to be fixed now. So again, that is anecdotal evidence, but I've got enough anecdotal evidence here in the comments that make me think there's something to this. Perhaps something sinister. Next comment. Yes, we noticed a huge reduction of eggs starting in mid-September. I decided to stop using Country Lane layer pellets and started buying chicken grains from our local co-op and started doing a 24-hour fermenting of those grain seed mix. We started getting the normal amount of winter eggs. We also started buying our scratch from a local co-op and started buying barley seeds and grow fodder. Huge, huge difference. We also feed kitchen scraps, and that's a common thread. Somebody came in early on and said, yeah, we feed our kitchen scraps and we haven't noticed any problems. And I replied back, I was like, man, that's great. But the problem is, like for me, it's just me and my wife now. So we don't actually generate enough kitchen scraps to keep them fully nourished. So I'm going to have to supplement something else, which is where we use the Nutritional brand food. Next comment. We have been feeding Producer's Pride for years. However, back in December, we saw a drastic reduction in production. I attributed it to the extreme cold weather we experienced. They have not recouped since. 8 hens were producing 48 a week. Now we're lucky to get a dozen. Coincidence? I will be switching feed to see if we can improve the production. That's a good idea. I mean, and again, anecdotal, but this is another person that's having a problem with the Producer's Pride feed. Next up here, has anyone conducted tests on feeds? I'd be curious to see not only what's been decreased, but what's been added. And then someone else answered that comment. Natural News is doing this now, testing 6 different brands. So I can't wait to see that. If you guys don't know who that is, that's Mike Adams over at naturalnews.com. Check it out. I think it's .com. Just go type in Natural News and you should be able to find it. You may have to go to Bing or something and not Google, but you should be able to find it. Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, I think is what they call him. And I've seen him do some very interesting testing, laboratory testing over the years as it related to the COVID and other stuff like that. And I can't wait to see what results he finds. Someone, and I couldn't find the comment, but someone said that they changed or reduced the amino acids that they were putting in the feed. And that could be it. I don't know enough about that. Again, I'm not a scientist. I don't know exactly what it is that causes the chickens to lay eggs, but that's probably as good of a guess as any, I would say. Next up here, I've been feeding mine Country Lane from Orchlands, and they 100% stopped laying in September too. Can't be a coincidence that so many people's birds stopped laying at around the exact same time. A few of mine just started laying again, and I bought agricultural feed quality MFA that I'm starting to wean over to. So again, Country Lane from Orchlands. So it's not exclusively Tractor Supply. Next up here. Yes, it happened to me too. I switched to a different feed and they started laying again. Nothing changed except the feed. We're in Florida, so the high today was in the 80s. Cold weather is not an issue. So I know a lot of people's initial instinct is to come in and say, well, it's the cold. They always, reduce production in the wintertime, so that's must be what it is. But I had several people come in from warmer climates, 2 or 3 from Florida, telling me the same thing, that this is happening to their flocks in 80-degree weather. That makes no sense to me. Something has changed here. At least that's my opinion. So again, I can't wait to see what Mike Adams finds out there on Natural News. And it'd be interesting to see if they've changed some fundamental thing inside the feed that's actually causing this to happen. There could be what I would say legal consequences if they can prove that. And, millions of chickens around the country are suddenly not producing any eggs. So the next commenter says, we've been using Producer's Pride for as long as I can remember, and we've not had any issues with our hens laying. A slowdown in the winter is to be expected, but even with that, our hens are doing well, making plenty of eggs. So again, that makes me think maybe it's a batch issue, or a certain plant is doing this, or multiple plants, but they're not all doing it, because some people are saying no change. Next up, we haven't had any issues. This is our first year with chickens. Producer's Pride scratch grain and Dumar 16% from Tractor Supply. We also use a light at night and feed them table scraps. We get 8 to 9 eggs a day out of 10 hens, and that's great. That's a great average. So again, it's not all of the Producer's Pride. And so I don't know. I can't really make heads or tails of this. Let me know what you think. I mean, is it all Purina products? Is it batch specific? Is this a test run maybe that they're doing to see if they can get away with this? I don't know. Next up, looks like someone is trying awfully hard to cause food shortages. There are too many coincidences that make me believe it's being done intentionally. And that's kind of the point that I was driving home in the last video. This ties into the WEF, the World Economic Forum, the UN Agenda 21, 2030, the Great Reset. You will own nothing and you will be happy. They don't want people being able to produce in their own backyard and bypass taxes and control and the government and going to the store and all that stuff. No. They don't like independence anymore. Next up here, Dumore is also in the Gateway Pundit article, and I didn't mention them last time because I was trying to keep the video short. That's what I've been using, it says. And my chickens stopped laying almost entirely for the last 4 months. I will be changing now. So look out if you're using Dumore brand. That's also one of them that's apparently seems to be causing reduced production. Next up. All I use or have ever used in the way of store-bought feed is Producer's Pride scratch grains and layer pellet crumble. I also add in sunflower seeds, calcium, dried army worm larvae, dried mealworm larvae, dried crickets, dried grasshoppers. They get live mealworms, fermented scratch grains, and chicken-appropriate table scraps every few days. 3 to 5 eggs a day from 5 hens since they started laying and still going strong. So that could be pointing us to something right there. This person is saying that they've been using all of the Producer's Pride products, but they're supplementing lots of extra protein. He named several things: dried crickets, dried grasshoppers, dried army worms, some live worms, things like that. So that could be the ticket, or that could be a big hint that maybe the protein as advertised as 16% is not actually 16% anymore in Tractor Supply / Purina's new formula. I don't know. Again, I have to speculate because we can't get good investigative journalists to go out and do their jobs anymore. Next up, people were complaining about the feed egg problem back last spring. I noticed a color change with Damar grower feed and thought it may have been moldy, so off to mom and pop store I went. It may have been an isolated incident. There is definitely a war on our food supply. I will gnaw the bark off my trees before I eat the bugs, because I talked about that in the last video about how that was part of the plan. They're trying to cut our meat production out and force us to eat the bugs, as Klaus Schwab has famously said. They have a real plan to force us to eat bugs. I made a video about it. Go check it out if you want. Next commenter says, I've been using Damar from Tractor Supply for years. About a month ago, I bought my feed like normal, brought it home and gave it to the hens, and after a week later, production ceased. This is not normal at all, even during winter. After I switched to Homestead Harvest Feed, I was back in business after only a few days. Again, more anecdotal evidence that something is going on here. I've been doing it for years and years. I've had, I think, 4 different flocks of hens over the years, and we haven't constantly kept them the entire time. There were some times we took a break and we didn't have any hens for a couple of years there. But when the COVID came on, I got back into the chicken business because I knew things were, looking pretty rough. And I have never seen zero egg production. Many people are reporting this out of this certain brand, Producer's Pride and Dumar, Purina branded food. So might be something you want to look into. This was a good one, and I selected this one because it's not just happening here in the United States. They're doing all kinds of stuff. And when I say they, I mean the WEF, the UN, Agenda 21, 2030, the New World Order. So this next commenter is from New Zealand. Here in New Zealand, they went a different way with the same result. New regulations say caged chickens is inhumane. Now everyone is complaining about the egg prices and supply. So he's saying that, or he or she is saying that they went a different way over there in New Zealand. Now they're just trying to basically make it inhumane and against their New Zealand code or laws or whatever. And now everyone's complaining about the egg prices. So they're creating the problems. It's an old formula. Problem, reaction, solution. The government is behind all of this stuff. And in this case, they've relinquished their power or given their power away to the globalist elite, the New World Order. So anyway, next up. Add me to the list. I knew something was up but couldn't figure it out. Started noticing a reduction in September down to maybe one a day. I thought it was a fall thing, and on a whim, I bought corn chops from Atwood's and immediately returned 9 to 10 eggs a day with 13 hens. I would love for one conspiracy theory to be proven a theory. This fact after fact stuff is getting old, and I agree with this commenter. I mean, oh man, I miss the days when conspiracy theories just sounded wild and there was no truth really to them when you really started digging. Now it seems like everyone is true or has come true. Next commenter says, my daughter's hen stopped all production for a little while now, 2 to 3 months maybe. She came across this talk of Tractor Supply feed as she uses the same brand you mentioned and no eggs in a while, 0. She gave hens flaxseed and almost a week ago after reading it may help. They are now finally laying eggs again, at least 2 to 3 days. Beware, this is really happening. So again, maybe anecdotal evidence, but it's happening all around the country, even in warmer climates where the wintertime temperatures aren't affecting the chickens like they would in a more northern climate. Next up, I feed Purina brand to my hens and haven't had a single egg since November. I only have 5 birds and I was getting 5 eggs a day consistently since they started laying. Now, nothing. And that is, part of the reason I'm doing this video series here is that is frustrating as hell. When you're building chicken coops, selecting the right chickens to bring into your backyard flock, trying to feed them the right stuff so that they'll give you what you want, which is the eggs. Most of us that have backyard flocks are doing it for egg production or for pets and things like that. So it's a big deal when you're not getting what you're supposed to be getting out of your birds. And people are realizing this and recognizing this, and that's why the internet is going crazy with this. I mean, I went through some of the tractor forums. I can't remember the name of that place. It was like a, what do they call that? I can't recall the name of it, but it was one of the forums for like farmers, and they were over and over and over, comment after comment after comment. People were saying the Purina brands, including Producer's Pride, had not reduced their egg laying, made it 0. That's a big deal. This next commenter says, I've been feeding Vibrant Life from Walmart, and I recently went back to Farmers from the feed store. Half a bag in, and my hens are starting to lay every day. They basically have not laid but 1 or 2 eggs, if any, since the summer of 2022. Could be the time of the year right now, but that doesn't explain last summer. So again, it's not exclusively a wintertime problem. This has been going on since last summer, according to many of my commenters here. Next up, just to toss this in, I've been using my local feed store 20% layer and nothing else. In September 2022, my egg production dropped to nearly nothing. I had some light in the evening and they started laying. On a fluke, I decided to try a bag of the cheaper Producer's Pride 16% from Tractor Supply, and bam, the chickens stopped laying immediately. I was at my local feed store again 2 weeks ago, and because I was there and I needed more feed, I bought my regular 20% feed, and literally a week later, they were laying again. Then yesterday, I see an article all about this Producer's Pride. Coincidence? No, it's not a coincidence. Something is going on here. Hopefully, Mike Adams will figure out what it is. Next up, it's all big box brands, especially Purina, which makes Producer's Pride. So Apparently, this commenter has tried a lot of the different box brands, or maybe they're getting reports from some of their friends and other people that are growing backyard flocks, and they're realizing it's all big box store brands. So you might want to like find yourself a local feed store or a co-op situation where you can go buy feed closer to direct from the farmers. The less middleman, the better. Last one here, 0 eggs for weeks. I've been asking my friends who raise chickens what's going on with them. I added a light a few weeks ago. I've changed a few other things, but still 0 eggs. My birds aren't sick, otherwise seem healthy, just no eggs. We live in Connecticut, and it's been relatively warm here. I have numerous lights. They seem happy. I've never gotten 0 eggs in winter. Eggs here are $8 a dozen. This conspiracy seems legit as much as I'd like to think it isn't. I'm going to look into feeding them something else to see what happens. So I can't wait for you guys to let me know down in the comments what your experiences have been. Have you been on the Producer's Pride or Walmart or Atwoods or, Rural King brands or these other brands and had similar outcomes with 0 egg production or little to no egg production? So I don't know, guys. This is a big deal. And I'll tell you one of the funny comments. I was actually wearing a camo hat last time I made the video, and one commenter came in and said, wow, I didn't know they made tinfoil hats in camo. And I actually legitimately laughed at that because I thought it was pretty funny. I get it. Some people, think I'm off the deep end or whatever and think I'm looking too much into the conspiracy side of things. But when I read the words from the World Economic Forum, the UN Agenda 21 2030, the end result is taking away our ability to feed ourselves. That's what communists always do. They go in and attack the farmers and the feed. You can go look at it. I mean, throughout history, 100 million people, something like that, have been killed from the communists. And it's not all being shot in the head. A lot of those people starved to death because the communists would come in, take control of the food supply, seizing the farms, seizing the production of the farmers, and then doling it out as they saw fit. Well, guess who got the last scraps? The actual people who were out there working the fields and stuff like that. They were the ones that starved to death. What was it called over in Ukraine? Holodomor or something like that. I'm probably saying the wrong way, but there was a massive deal with Stalin coming in, seizing the farms in Ukraine back in the day, and starving millions and millions of people to death. Food production is a powerful thing. Being able to produce your own food and being more self-reliant, more self-sufficient in your own backyard is a big, big deal. And millions of chickens around the country being slaughtered for supposed avian flu that no one can prove. I mean, like someone pointed out in the comments, these birds that were killed didn't actually test positive for avian flu. They just killed them because 1 or 2 birds tested positive for avian flu. So they killed all of them. Reminds me of the way they were counting the COVID numbers back during the pandemic and the lockdown. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Again, a lot of this stuff is anecdotal, but since we don't have investigative journalists that are willing to go out and risk their careers, put their necks on the line to open up these stories like this, it's up to people like us to spread the word. So if you like this kind of content, consider subscribing. Come down there, let me know. If you don't like this content, come down in the comments and tell me in a polite way where you disagree with me or all of these people that have commented on these videos. We'd love to read them. And let's keep it cordial, keep it civil, and be polite to each other. We all got to live here together, whether we like it or not. So, as always, guys, I stand for liberty. I hope you do too.